dance without self-judgment, laugh without reservation. The version of you who isn't paralyzed by anxiety, doubt, or self-consciousness. But alcohol doesn't create that version of you. It simply lowers the barriers you've built around it. And in doing so, it tricks you into believing that the drink is the source of your wholeness. That without it, you aren't enough. You become dependent, not on the substance, but on the experience of briefly tasting your own authentic self, however artificially induced. The tragedy is that this version of you was never locked behind a bottle. It was always there, buried beneath layers of unhealed wounds and conditioned fear. But because alcohol delivers it quickly, without the discomfort of genuine introspection, it becomes the shortcut you return to again and again. And every time you do, you reinforce the false belief that you need an external substance to access your true self. This is where the illusion tightens its grip. You drink to connect, to others, to yourself, to life. But what's actually happening is the opposite. True connection requires presence, vulnerability, and full awareness. Alcohol removes you from presence. It replaces vulnerability with artificial confidence and suppresses the awareness required for true emotional depth. You think you're connecting more deeply with others, but in reality, you're lowering your boundaries. You're exposing yourself energetically, emotionally, spiritually. And the connections you form in that state are often built on a fragile foundation, one that rarely survives when the buzz fades and the clarity returns. The more often you turn to alcohol to create this counterfeit connection, the more difficult it becomes to access true connection without it. Your nervous system becomes wired to associate ease with intoxication. Your social identity forms around the behaviors you exhibit while drinking. Over time, you begin to believe that the version of you who shows up sober isn't as fun, as lovable, or as worthy. You stop trusting your own sober presence, and that belief feeds the cycle of return. But here's the hardest truth to face. The internal discomfort that alcohol so effectively suppresses is not your enemy. It's your guide. The anxiety, the fear, the emotional tension. These are not problems to mute. They are signals pointing you toward the parts of yourself that are asking for healing. Every drink you take to silence those messengers delays your growth. You push the discomfort aside temporarily, but you never resolve its root. The longer you avoid it, the more entrenched the wounds become, and the more you need alcohol to manage the growing weight. This is why so many people feel hollow after a night of drinking. Even when nothing dramatic happened, even when the evening was filled with laughter, there's an emptiness that lingers. It's the quiet knowing that you bypassed something real, that you chose ease over presence, suppression over integration, and that dissonance accumulates. You wake up not just with a headache, but with a subtle heaviness in your spirit, a dull ache that whispers, something's not quite right. The system thrives on this cycle. It keeps you chasing a version of yourself you can't fully access, because you've been conditioned to believe that you need alcohol to get there. But the truth is far simpler and far more empowering. You don't need alcohol to feel whole. You need the courage to sit with your discomfort, to face your shadows, to embrace your vulnerability without numbing it. That's where real connection lives. That's where your authentic self waits, not in the bottom of a glass, but in the space you've been taught to avoid. Across every major spiritual tradition, there are clear warnings about intoxication. But in the modern world, these teachings have been diluted, reinterpreted, or ignored entirely. We've inherited fragments of ancient wisdom, stripped of their depth and context, while discarding the parts that feel inconvenient to our desires. The caution against substances like alcohol wasn't born from puritanical control or fear of pleasure. It was grounded in an understanding of how altered states affect consciousness, energy, and spiritual integrity. In Buddhism, intoxicants are explicitly listed as one of the precepts to be avoided, not because drinking makes you a bad person, but because it clouds awareness. And awareness, in Buddhist teaching, is the cornerstone of liberation. The Eightfold Path demands presence, right intention, and clarity of mind. When you introduce substances that dull that clarity, you invite suffering, confusion, and disconnection from the very path that leads you closer to enlightenment. The danger lies not in the act itself, but in what it does to your state of consciousness. The Taoist perspective frames it differently, but points to the same truth. The Tao, the natural flow of the universe, requires balance, harmony, and internal stillness. To align with the Tao is to move with grace and effortless presence, but alcohol throws you off that center. It pulls you into extremes, into artificial highs and eventual lows. It disrupts the delicate rhythm of intuition, making life feel chaotic rather than fluid. When you're disconnected from the Tao, you lose the internal compass that guides your journey with ease. Even in Christian mysticism, the warnings are there for those willing to see beyond the rituals. Saints and mystics throughout history spoke of the need for vigilance, for guarding the heart and mind against influences that lead to excess and forgetfulness. Saint Paul Augustine described drunkenness as a form of self-abandonment, a surrender not to the divine but to escapism. The New Testament urges spiritual sobriety not because pleasure is inherently wrong, but because dulling the senses leads to spiritual vulnerability. The true danger is not the drink, but the erosion of your awareness. Islam is even more direct. Alcohol is haram, prohibited entirely. Again, not as a moral punishment, but as a protective boundary. The soul, in Islamic mysticism, is seen as a trust, a vessel given by the divine. To intoxicate oneself is to violate that trust, to compromise the vessel's clarity and open the door to chaos. In Sufism, which explores the deepest layers of spiritual awareness, clarity and presence are sacred. Anything that clouds that state is a barrier to union with the divine. The alchemical and hermetic traditions, perhaps more than any others, understood the dual nature of substances like alcohol. The alchemists revered distillation as a powerful process capable of extracting essence. But they also feared it. They knew that what you extract isn't always light. Alcohol could be a tool for transformation in controlled ritual, but in careless hands, it became a solvent of spiritual integrity. They understood that intention was everything. Without discipline, the same process that could elevate consciousness could also dissolve it into chaos. Yet somewhere along the way, we cherry-picked what we liked from these teachings and discarded the rest. We kept the aesthetic symbols, wine at weddings, celebratory toasts, Dionysian festivals, but abandoned the wisdom that gave those symbols meaning. We took sacred substances, stripped them of their spiritual purpose, and turned them into tools of entertainment. What was once a gateway to higher states became a mechanism for spiritual numbness, and we called it fun. This is the illusion modern culture sells so well, that by indulging in alcohol we are embracing life, celebrating freedom, and connecting deeply. But ancient traditions knew better. They understood that clarity is the highest form of protection. That presence is the shield against forces that seek to feed on your disconnection. When you're present, you are sovereign. You cannot be easily influenced, manipulated, or hijacked by energies that thrive on confusion. But when you dull that presence, even temporarily, you become susceptible in ways you may not consciously recognize. The spiritual path has never been about deprivation. It's about resonance, about maintaining a frequency high enough to stay connected to your highest self, your purpose, and your truth. Alcohol lowers that frequency. You may not notice it after one drink, or even after many years of casual use, but your soul feels it. The subtle dulling, the growing difficulty to access your intuition, the increasing reliance on external stimulation to feel at ease. It's all evidence of an erosion happening beneath the surface. What makes alcohol so effective as a spiritual sedative is precisely that it doesn't feel like deprivation in the moment. It feels like release. It delivers the illusion of connection while quietly pulling you away from your source. And because the culture rewards this behavior, because everyone else is doing it, it becomes harder and harder to question. You learn to silence the faint signals of disconnection, to override your instincts, to normalize the fog. But the warnings were never hidden. They've always been in plain sight, repeated across traditions, across time. The teachers, mystics, and sages tried to tell us that clarity is not something to be toyed with. That once you compromise your awareness, even briefly, you invite consequences that are not always easy to reverse. And yet, here we are, living in a world where alcohol is celebrated while spiritual clarity is quietly eroded one sip at a time. The good news is that the damage alcohol inflicts on your energetic system isn't permanent. Energy isn't static. It moves. It responds. It recalibrates when given the right conditions. What's been fractured can be mended. What's been dulled can be reignited. But healing requires more than just abstaining from alcohol. It demands a conscious return to your natural state, a reconnection with the parts of yourself that alcohol silenced for so long. The first step is presence, true presence. Not the kind you force through discipline, but the kind you allow through surrender. You must come back into your body, not as something to escape or numb, but as something to honor. Presence is uncomfortable at first because you're meeting parts of yourself that you've avoided. The tension you once muted with alcohol rises to the surface. The unease you tried to drown speaks louder. But this is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of returning. Your discomfort is not your enemy. It's your compass. Each layer of tension you sit with is a message from your own system, pointing to where you've been out of alignment. Alcohol taught you to suppress those signals. Healing teaches you to listen. The more you listen, the more those fragmented pieces of yourself begin to return. Your energetic field starts to strengthen, slowly sealing the micro-tears that left you vulnerable for so long. Meditation becomes a powerful tool here, not because it grants you instant peace, but because it reintroduces you to yourself. As you sit with your breath, your awareness sharpens. You create space between thought and reaction, between sensation and avoidance. Over time, the mental chatter quiets, not through suppression, but through integration. You begin to trust your own mind again. Breathwork complements this process by shifting your nervous system out of survival mode. Alcohol offered you temporary relief from chronic tension by numbing your stress response. But breathwork teaches your body how to release that tension naturally, restoring a sense of safety and stability without artificial intervention. With every conscious breath, you send a new message to your system. We are safe now. We don't need to run anymore. But the healing isn't only internal. Your energetic field responds to external support as well. Practices like Reiki, sound healing, and energy clearing aren't abstract rituals. They operate directly on the frequencies that alcohol once disrupted. They help realign your aura, patch the energetic leaks, and clear out residual influences that may have attached during your periods of disconnection. As your field strengthens, you feel more grounded, more protected, more attuned to your own intuition. Yoga plays a vital role too, not simply as exercise, but as a resynchronization of your physical and energetic bodies. Through movement, breath, and awareness, you rebuild the trust between your body and your consciousness. The flexibility you cultivate is not just in your muscles, but in your ability to stay present with whatever arises. You no longer need to flee your internal world. You meet it, fully awake, and discover that it cannot break you. Nature is perhaps one of the most underestimated allies in this process. Time spent in forests, by the ocean, or under an open sky recalibrates your system in ways nothing else can. These environments resonate with frequencies your body instinctively remembers. They reset your internal rhythm, quiet the manufactured noise of modern life, and remind you of what your natural state feels like. In the stillness of nature, you don't need to perform, you simply are. Intention is the silent architect behind all of this. Your field responds to your choices, your thoughts, your will. When you set a clear intention to heal, to reclaim, to realign, you initiate a process far more powerful than passive abstinence. You begin attracting the people, resources, and insights that support your awakening. Synchronicities increase. Resistance softens. The world around you starts to mirror the clarity you're rebuilding within. This isn't about purity or perfection. It's not about shaming yourself for past choices. It's about awareness. About deciding, right now, that you're done giving your power away to something that was never designed to serve your highest good. Every small act of presence, every meditation, every conscious breath, every moment of stillness rebuilds the foundation alcohol once eroded. You start to feel whole without reaching for something outside yourself. You stop mistaking suppression for peace. You stop chasing shortcuts to joy because you realize the source of your joy was never outside you to begin with. True freedom is not found in the absence of pain, but in your capacity to meet it fully. To feel deeply without being drowned by it. To trust yourself enough to stand present, even when your old patterns beg you to run. This is the freedom alcohol pretended to offer, but could never deliver. And once you taste this kind of sovereignty, you lose interest in anything that pulls you away from it. The version of you that was seeking connection through alcohol wasn't broken. It was misled. That longing you felt was real. It was your essence calling you home. And now, without numbing, without sedating, you are learning to answer that call. What makes this journey so profound isn't just the personal healing, it's the awakening that naturally follows. Because once you've experienced the kind of clarity that sobriety offers, you start to see the world differently. You see how deeply most people are still trapped, not because they're weak or broken, but because they've been conditioned their entire lives to believe that numbing is normal. You see how the culture pushes escapism at every turn, not only with alcohol, but with everything designed to distract you from yourself. and you start to realize how rare it is to meet someone who is fully present, fully alive, fully sovereign in their energy. But you are not alone. Quietly, more and more people are waking up. They're questioning the scripts they were handed. They're stepping away from substances, habits, and thought patterns that once felt inseparable from their identity. And every person who awakens creates a ripple that extends far beyond themselves. Because clarity is contagious. When you stand in your truth, others feel it. It gives them permission to question their own disconnection. This awakening isn't about perfection. You don't have to live in some pure, untouched state to reclaim your power. You simply have to be honest, with yourself and with the world around you. Honest enough to admit when you've been numbing, honest enough to acknowledge when you've been running, and honest enough to stay present when your discomfort arises. Because the truth is, the only way out is through. The path back to your essence requires the courage to meet every part of yourself, even the parts that once terrified you. As you return to presence, something remarkable happens. Your intuition sharpens. The fog that once clouded your decisions begins to lift. You trust your instincts again. You recognize when a situation feels off, when a person's energy doesn't align with yours, when an opportunity resonates or repels. You stop second-guessing yourself because you're no longer filtering your perception through layers of numbing and self-doubt. Your field strengthens. Your sovereignty returns. And with that sovereignty comes a quiet confidence. A confidence not rooted in external validation or chemically induced ease, but in the deep knowing that you are whole without needing to alter your state. You become less reactive, more grounded, more magnetic. People notice, even if they can't quite articulate what's different about you. It's the radiance of unfiltered presence. The energy of someone who no longer needs permission to exist fully. The system that once kept you numbed and compliant fears this kind of awakening. Because sovereign individuals cannot be easily controlled. They don't fall for shallow marketing tactics. They don't need to buy products to feel whole. They question authority. They disrupt patterns. And they live in alignment with their own truth. This is why the system celebrates indulgence and ridicules sobriety. Because when you're numbed, you're manageable. But when you're awake, you're a force. If you're serious about reclaiming your clarity, there's more we can't say here. That's why Insights Academy exists, our free newsletter where we explore what others are afraid to reveal. Join now using the link below and receive the Kybalion ebook while it's still available. You are part of a growing movement, whether you realize it or not. A quiet revolution of souls who are no longer willing to trade their essence for comfort. A collective of individuals who are remembering what it means to live from alignment rather than escapism. And while the journey may feel lonely at times, you are not walking it alone. Each step you take towards presence inspires others to do the same. The collective field shifts every time one person chooses clarity over numbness. This is the deeper truth the system never wanted you to see, that freedom doesn't come from rebellion or indulgence. It comes from radical presence, from the willingness to face yourself without filters, without substances, without distractions. And once you taste that level of freedom, the hollow pleasures that once seduced you lose their grip. You see them for what they are, temporary highs masking a deeper emptiness. You no longer crave the synthetic version of connection because you've found the real thing, and it's unshakable. The choice to awaken is not one the culture will celebrate. In fact, it may even resist you. Friends may not understand. Social circles may shift. You may face moments of doubt, moments where the comfort of old patterns tempts you to return. But every time you choose presence, you strengthen your field. Every time you sit with discomfort rather than numbing it, you reclaim a piece of your power. And over time, you realize that what once felt terrifying is now your greatest source of strength. The discomfort was never there to break you. It was there to bring you home. The version of you that you've been searching for through alcohol, through temporary highs, through social performance, it was never lost. It's been quietly waiting beneath the noise, beneath the conditioning, beneath the layers of fear and self-protection you were taught to build. That version of you isn't some distant ideal you need to strive toward. It's your natural state. It's who you were before the world convinced you that you weren't enough as you are. The system was never designed to help you find that self. In fact, it was designed to keep you from it. Because someone who is clear, present, and aligned with their own truth cannot be manipulated. They cannot be sold endless distractions or promised happiness through consumption. They don't need to numb discomfort because they understand its message. And that kind of sovereignty threatens everything the system relies on to maintain control. When you live in full presence, You start to see how much of your life was shaped by a craving for something that was never external to begin with. The alcohol was never the source of your confidence, your joy, or your connection. It was a temporary silence, a manufactured pause in the noise of your own avoidance. But true peace doesn't come from numbing. It comes from integration, from facing your fears, not fleeing them, from feeling your emotions fully, not suppressing them, from trusting yourself enough to stay grounded when everything inside you once told you to escape. The beauty of awakening is that it doesn't require perfection. You don't need to have every answer, every wound healed, or every fear conquered. You simply need to be willing to show up, to meet yourself honestly, moment by moment, breath by breath. You become aware of your patterns, and in that awareness, the patterns begin to lose their power over you. You create space between the impulse and the reaction, and in that space, you reclaim your freedom. Over time, the sensations you once chased through intoxication start to emerge naturally. You laugh more easily. You connect more deeply. You move through life with a kind of grounded confidence that doesn't need external validation. Your relationships become richer because they're built on true connection, not the blurred vulnerability of lowered inhibitions. You create experiences that don't need to be fueled by altered states because you're fully alive within your natural one. And perhaps most powerfully, you begin to remember everything. The conversations, the sensations, the insights, they stay with you. No fog, no confusion, no mourning after regret. Just the steady presence of someone who no longer needs to borrow joy, rent confidence, or purchase temporary freedom. You become the source of your own alignment. The joy you feel is yours. The clarity you hold is yours, and no one can take it from you. This is the freedom that the world rarely speaks about. The freedom not to perform, not to escape, not to conform. The freedom to feel fully alive in your own skin, without needing a filter to soften the edges. The freedom to trust your own presence so deeply that you no longer seek permission to be fully seen. This isn't the kind of freedom that gets marketed. It can't be sold. It can only be lived. And in living it, you become a mirror for others. Your presence invites others to question their own disconnection. Your sovereignty sparks curiosity in those who are still numbing themselves, wondering quietly if there's another way. Your awakening becomes not just a personal victory, but a silent revolution. One that doesn't require force or argument, but simply the undeniable power of truth embodied. There will always be moments when the old patterns call to you, when the familiar promise of quick relief tries to seduce you back into the cycle. But every time you choose to remain present, you strengthen your field. You reinforce your sovereignty. And with each choice, the pull weakens. The illusion loses its hold. You were never broken. You were never weak for reaching for comfort. You were simply following the programming you were given. But now you've seen through it. Now you know. And with that knowing comes responsibility. The responsibility to choose presence, to honor your energy, to reclaim the clarity that was always your birthright. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting. I understood it.